All right, everybody. I think we are live. This, damn, this was a long time ago. um, but yeah, recently, I mean, the CBI was played, and I was playing in it, and I wanted to have a stream and just chat about the decks because there's like a lot of thoughts about them. I even made some a lot of notes, uh, but we'll see exactly where it goes. And just yeah, feel free to ask any questions. But um, basically, well, we can start with the lat. Um, so this is the lat deck that I ended up getting seventh with. It has kind of a long history behind it because I've been playing some kind of Aesop's lat basically since Rebellion Without Rehearsal was released. Because of course you got the the Coalescence and Muse to give you like a lot of Aesop's fodder. I think I have. Yeah, this is like the earliest version that I played in a tournament. Hey, what's up, Yeah, I know the retired meme. the it's yeah. Technically, I retired from competitive Netrunner. Like my decks weren't that competitive, so. um, but yeah. The Yeah. So this deck, it started out something like this, or actually, it started out with some kind of turbine rig, but then turned into this. But anyway, the earlier versions of the competitive ones, they had like a much leaner rig to kind of like counter the fast decks. And as I saw more slow decks getting mixed in, this list started morphing to something like this big right up here, where I was kind of trying to have my cake and eat it too, with some like the ability to go for like a turbine rig, but you also have some breakers that get you in early on. And there's a bunch of thoughts on this, but like essentially this one, for even though it could be powerful in some games, it ended up having some problems. I remember discussing lat with William at one point, comparing like the program lats I had been brewing, was brewing, continuing to brew, and his event based lat, and there were some good thoughts in there because I have been basically testing mostly on my own this year. Sometimes like there's like an issue with like not knowing the meta fully, or like not knowing exactly how a matchup will go, and that's probably still going to be a factor. But I think some of the changes that we discussed were like actually really good for the deck and made a lot of sense. So one of them that is like copied from Sokka's list is playing Hannah. Another one is playing Chart Room. And this part is was basically like you need this to deal with a lot of the kill decks that go around. There was like Barf Thule that attacks you on clicks. There's like NEH kill of different kinds. A lot of different kill decks. You can use the Stone Chip for Asmari as well. So there's like a billion things that try to kill you, where the Stone Chip is pretty useful. And he was like, yeah, that's basically necessary. And I was like, okay, I can see the argument. Like the way the old list went is like, I mean, okay, you're good at breaking ice, but what if the decks that you're facing are doing something weird. Like if they're trying to click compress you, you're having issues. If they're trying to maybe tag you really hard or kill you in some combo way, you might have issues. So with this new list, you have more game against that stuff. And also, I found that even though I can contest remotes early, because that game plan hinders your setup so much, you're still kind of a big rig in the long term. I found that like trying to both be able to get in early and set up your rig didn't really work because even if you do get in and trash something or steal something, you might be slowing yourself down so much to do that. You might dip so low that, okay, now you can't install your important pieces. You have to take a turn to like click up for credits, stuff like that. That in this next list, I just ended up going for the most ambitious rig, but with more speed. So actually Boitata is new and is like actually brilliant in this deck because you get to a point where you can get the discount on Boitata like every turn, and it's incredibly efficient. And then you have the price, and that I think is like the big key to this new build is how much this speeds up your setup. So the price, it does two things. Like, of course, it digs through your deck faster, which means like really important pieces like Aesop, which could be a thing where if you don't draw it, just kind of ruins your game. Now it's much easier to find because you can get it with the price. However, if you already drew your Aesop or whatever other piece you're digging for, it's just discounting you on the card you're installing while also getting programs into your bin. And of course, because you have Simulchip, you can get programs back for a discount there as well. So you're getting the discount from the price, and you're probably also getting discount from Simulchip. So that also mitigates the downside of the price, which is like if you play this in Anarch, sometimes you might mill a breaker that you actually wanted to install, and then you can't get it back. But in Shaper, you have Simulchip, and you can easily get it back. And also, this deck can go like either just a one turbine rig or maybe no turbine. Like some decks are really lean with their ice. Some kill decks in particular, like maybe an NEH kill deck, have like really lean ice. And then you might not even need to install a turbine. And some decks, one turbine might be enough. But with two turbine, you essentially ensure that you always beat the slow Glacier decks. Also, hi to Diogene. Thank you. It feels good to. I guess I always do this, but I love coming with my own brew and like with my own take on the game at the moment and just seeing how it goes. And it was really fun. The lat was doing pretty well. The BTL, people were really hyped about the BTL, but I feel like maybe it was a little undercooked. Like I see some potential, or maybe it's just like not the right meta call, but still it was like a good show. But we'll get there. The boss says I will only allow the inclusion of Boitata due to the potential for double turbine. Well, the thing is, like with Boy, is like there are some eyes in the game where normal turbine rigs are like kind of lame considering how much you invested in them. Like if you have an echelon and turbine, and then you still need to pay 2 to break a drafter. It's like you still need to pay 3 for a Sicentan. You still need to, I don't know. Archer, for example, that's a good example. You would need to boost. And even if you get like 2 turbines, you break Archer for, what is it? For 4. With Boitata, you can have 1 turbine and break Archer for 4 credits. So I really like the card, actually. in this particular list. Like I don't think it works in a lot of cases, but in this list I think it works. Yeah. Of course. Yeah, I dropped like the overclocks and stuff because that's mostly stuff that you use to just push remotes and finally we can afford to break tithe. Yeah, true. But you used overclocks to like aggressively push remotes early on mainly. Here we are just kind of like installing cards until we get enough to start pushing, and then we are a remote lock deck essentially, because we get so efficient with the breakers that we can get in every turn. And this actually comes back to how brilliant I think Hana is, because you could look at Hana and say it's a tech card to deal with tags, to deal with assets, and yes, but it actually just helps this deck in general, because if you're a remote lock deck and you want to run the remote like every turn, well then you're just saving a click every turn. So basically, against every deck, you're gonna make use of this because your plan is to eventually like run the remote every turn. So Hana is like basically never a dead card, which I love. And the other tech, this was actually another note I had. Like the deck is basically techless. So you have chart room, but that can just be like against kill, but that can just be used to pop for 2 cards. And you have Hush, which I think is the most techie card ever. Sorry, not ever. The most techie card in the deck. However, I think like in most matchups, Hush has a target. You could even argue in worst case, you can like install it with the DCMC discount and then trash it with Aesop. Like that is actually possible. Same reason I would say Parisha is kind of not a tech card is like it's not that bad of a trade if you have a Aesop out to just play that and trash it with Aesop. In order to buy some slots in this list, I was kind of inspired by one of Pinsel's old list, pre-ban list. There was a World Tree Arizona that was trying to play Aesop and World Tree. So if the corp went passive and like defended all centrals for World Tree, you could use Aesop to still make use of all the programs. I thought that was kind of cool, and I was brewing kind of a lat before the World Tree ban to do something with that. But one thing in there that I thought was neat to save on deck slots was going down to only one self-modifying code. And this makes even more sense if you're no longer trying to do the really aggressive like overclock or trick shot turn 1 plays. This is something that you can just get with Muse when you need it instead. Yeah, so you're trying to go for the remote lock, and you're setting up, let's see here. You're setting up as much rig as you need. You have a very strong econ engine. Environmental testing is very great in this deck. Like usually takes like 2 turns to pop this. Yeah. Damn, what was I thinking? Oh yeah. So there's Conduit as well. This is new. In all the other lists, the R&D pressure was different. So in this list, there was Stargate. And Stargate is a strong card. But the problem is, in this kind of list, it was actually like, especially against faster decks, like actually having the memory for Stargate is a problem when you're at the same time relying on Muse for your economy. So you're taking up like too many memory slots with all your stuff, and then Stargate ends up coming out like way too late. So it ends up being something that I guess you only use in the late game anyway, and then I don't know if it makes that much sense. In the earlier versions, so like my first deck basically didn't have any multi-access. Let's see, this one. It was like Trick Shot and then Cupulation for HQ. So Trickshot could multi-access, but nothing beyond that. Um, Wait, yeah, this one. And then I ended up trying Pretty Mary, Da Silva, and Niashia for intercons. And the reason this made sense compared to trying to play Conduit was like I was playing the lean breakers. So you can't have something where you need to run through R&D multiple times, because if your breakers are inefficient, then you don't want to be running multiple times to charge the conduit. However, in the case of this lat, because two things, like the inevitability of the rig means they tend to want to rush more, which might leave R&D more open, which lets you kind of like slam conduit down and then force them to ice R&D. That's one thing, but also once they do ice R&D, once you establish your breakers, you can easily afford to charge the conduit by going through the ice multiple times. So conduit makes a lot of sense, and also you can get like the price discount with it and everything. So it just ended up making a lot of sense. Like I think like Cataloger is a strong card, but in this list, conduit just makes a lot of sense. It's also something you can tutor, even if that doesn't happen that much. The fact that you can is really useful, and it only takes up one memory slot, which is important. I guess a bit of a shame that it can be purged, but that hasn't been too big of an issue for me. Yeah. I guess Ba says 1 SMC with 3 Muse is top tier in my opinion. It's just like really hard to fit all of that stuff in your deck. I just found myself like, when looking at this list, I find it really hard to make any cuts or adjustments. And also I don't find myself missing SMC too much. One thing that offsets that a little bit is that there's a copy of Propeller, so you don't need to find all of your... you don't need to find 3 one-offs. You need to find one of Cleaver and Propeller, and then the other 2. And you can tutor one of them possibly. It makes it a little easier to get like breaking capabilities, and then you can possibly get your Cleaver out a bit later. So I think that's cool. I also had some thoughts on like particular matchups, but there was a question before that I thought was interesting, which is if you there was a question that I was this was on the podcast we were doing, Ba. We were talking about how a question was, why not just play a rig like this in Anarch? Anarchs can play the price, they can play moshing to draw through their deck fast, so they can get all their pieces up really fast. And I did have partially an answer, which was those decks typically don't get away with having Hush in them that easily. But actually, it's a good question to think about, I think. Like, why build in particular this deck? There were actually a couple of reasons that I came up with. So one of them is Boitata is only playable in this kind of list. And I think that's kind of important. Like that, I feel like that one is so much better than Echelon. It's kind of sad if you get your turbine rig out, but then you're not that efficient anyway. So with Boitata, you're like uber efficient all the time. Another thing is, we can do mid-run hushing. That's important. Hush is also important in general, because if you don't have Hush, then basically you can't beat the decks that like advance their barriers to a ridiculous level. But with the Hush, then you should always be crushing any kind of Glacier, I think. Like there may be some game where they can establish like 2 barriers on the same server that are really high strength, but that is very hard to do, I think, and also like the barriers need to actually be above 7 before they start being that taxing. So it's like it seems like just unrealistic. Yeah. There's like because you have Simulchip, you have a way of getting around Half-Rune in this deck. Now Half-Rune is not really played a lot, so not super relevant. Because you're Shaper, you have Stone Ship and Simulchip Lily Pad combo, you can survive a lot of different kill stuff. Yeah. Like Anarch has Steel Skin, but there's some perks to Stone Ship that don't apply to Anarch. Like one kind of niche thing is if you're up against Asmari with Neurospike, then after they score, the new versions of that list actually play. I think we can look at. Yeah, so this is the EMEA winning list by Ben, who's an awesome guy and also started the Surveyor, the Netrunner newspaper, basically. So very happy to see him winning this event. He has switched now, or like I guess a whole of EA, EA Sports, has switched to playing Neurospike instead of what's it called again? Jupstad Grid in the re-education Asmari. Now, actually, I haven't practiced this matchup, but a theoretical advantage of Stone Ship is that after re-education is scored, you have a window to pop Stone Ship, and then if you have Lilypad and a Simulchip or an SMC, you can pop that for another card, go to 3, and then you will not die to 1 Neurospike, which is kind of sick. Yeah, so that's another perk of the lat. The Diogene asked, or actually some questions. How do we want to use DJ Fendries here? Oh, that's a good question. So DJ, I think usually your default is going to be Steve, but I think you definitely want to think about what matchup you're playing and what phase of the game you're in when you get DJ. So let's say you're up against Asset Spam. If you get DJ early, you might consider just going Lu so that you get extra value when you trash their stuff. If it's later in the game and you've already been parishing most of their assets, then you probably go Steve to get stuff back. If you're up against Glacier, this will almost always be Steve, just to have like an infinite money engine. You get your Coalescence, your Muses back, your Simulchips. This means that they like are never going to tax you out, which is great. Now, a third case actually, which came up against Brandon in the finals, he was on his Asa deck, is that's kind of like a fast, spammy deck where you often don't find yourself having the clicks to like run enough. So then I just played DJ as Sable because I wasn't getting in on HQ, and waiting to be able to get into HQ would mean like DJ's just sitting there for a couple more turns. So I prefer just slamming DJ and getting extra clicks to check servers. Allows you to be a bit more aggressive. And just like Hannah, that's great for this deck because your economy is very click intensive. It frees up your clicks to be used for that economy and the setup that you want to be doing. Even once you're set up, you usually kind of spend one click or one click every other turn just to keep your economy rolling by playing Muse, by playing Coalescence. So if you're up against some kind of rushy deck, I would recommend that. I could see a case against particular Obelisk for even going Loss, but that's like a very niche. If they are playing like Tucana, Eminent Domain stuff, I can see cases for just going Loss and getting all that free money from when they're resting all these ice as they are scoring. At least I remember when I was playing Hoshiko in 2023, this was like the line against particular rushy decks. This was even before Eminent Domain. Not sure if it applies as well now. but I think those are your main considerations. So against decks where you're like, I'm just not going to have the clicks to run this against this corp enough, then you probably want to be Sable. But usually, if you're up against like net damage or stuff, you go Steve. Steve is often good against asset spam too, because you can grind them out over time. So yeah, that's my nuanced answer. Diogene says, why not have put Deep Dive in the deck? So Deep Dive is, first of all, like getting the extra click for Deep Dive for me in this deck is, well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's not impossible. You have DJ, you have Hannah, but you don't know how fast you'll get those, first of all, is my thinking. And also, it's going to take a lot of time before you can actually use it then. So the Deep Dive will kind of just sit in your hand, because a problem in this deck is like you can't really run much before you have your full rig set up. So if you are required to get past, like, if they just put like one ice on one central, you might not be able to pull off Deep Dive for a long time, and then it's just sitting in your hand. So I think Deep Dive is like just doesn't fit here. With Conduit, it's a card that like we're totally okay with just like milling it, or even maybe discarding it if we won't use it. But it also synergizes with our other stuff. And we don't have to have the stuff that gives us extra click to make use of it. So this is less dependent. Like, sure, Deep Dive can still be used to get one agenda, but I think that's probably not justification enough to play Deep Dive if we're only getting one agenda for it. Also, hey there, Harald. I think that as for like how the deck does in general, I made like a huge list, but like overall, I don't know if this applies to Asmari, because I just don't know if the deck sets up your Stone Ship, Lily Pad, Symbol Chip, or SMC fast enough. If you do that, then I think you should be fine against the Neurospike lists that are out nowadays, like Ben's list. And also your breakers are great into this. Unsmiling could be unpleasant, maybe, if they pay so that you can only break one subroutine. But overall, you're breaking these like very cheaply if you actually get your breakers up, and you don't need to get Turbine. The only benefit would be breaking Messany Chest was cheaper, and that's a one-off in the deck. So yeah, you probably don't need to install Turbine, which makes your setup faster. So you can get in faster than you used to be able to. Like Piranhas kind of was a problem before, and you have some tech against it. But I still don't know if you're fast enough. So you might still lose against this. I don't know. But overall against Kill, you have like you have enough tools. Barf Tool, you have Acid Hate, you have Hannah for the tags, you have Stone Ship for survivability. NEH Kill. To be fair, most of this I haven't been able to put into practice, but like theoretically at least. So 74 AOB combo kill, something like Sebastian played, something disgusting. Like, something disgusting like this, where you just get like a bunch of upgrades, play Mad to like put a bunch of tags on them. It's nasty, but with our tricks to clear a lot of tags, like with Hannah and basically with Hannah, and our ability to survive 2 end of the lines for a turn, this might be a doable matchup. Like, I don't really know, because there are tricks, like if we get Urban Renewal popped and then Madded, then we're low on cards and we might die anyway. So I'm not totally sure about this one, actually. It might be tricky. But yeah, you have tools against Kill and assets, so I think those matchups are pretty fun in general, because they can turn out quite grindy. Glacier is great because they are too slow. This basically auto wins against all Glacier as far as I've tried it. So it won against all the Ags and BTLs basically that I played both in practice and in tournaments. The problem is the very rushy decks. And there's like, it's kind of a mixed bag. I don't really know exactly where it stands. I think probably a lot of them are going to be like unfavored to slightly unfavored if you're lucky. Maybe it's more even than I thought because I did start practicing a little bit for these matchups when I was going into the finals against Brandon, who was on Asa, which kind of a fast asset deck. I was actually doing okay in those games. Like it felt pretty even. I don't know if that's reflective, but you have some tools against it. Against Facetob, because of your acetate, you can at least deny a little bit of that plan, even though they will sometimes be too fast for you. Against a PD, as far as I've seen, because they can't fast advance out the last points, you have pretty good game against it, actually. Although PD is not big in the meta right now. Well, yeah, that's kind of how the deck does overall. I was considering if there should be, pinholes in here to deal with like some of the Hollow Man stuff before you're able to get into servers. It could slow down Asa. It could help a little against Asmari. It could be a thing. I'm struggling to think of things right now. I mean, but I think there are probably some other cases. I think perhaps against like BTL or AG, you could get rid of their stuff earlier. Although I think in those matchups it matters less because as long as you break ice efficiently enough, you can kind of just run the remote over and over. The real problem is before that point. So if you had pinholes to trash stuff before then, that can be useful. But yeah, I'm not quite sure because the pinhole will kind of clog up your deck again and make it less clean. So I kind of like it the way it is. Yeah, that's like the lat. I don't know if there are any other questions for it. Yeah. I guess let's go to the corp. Oh, and again, this did in the tournament. I guess this only dropped one game. It only played 5 games though, of course, so like 4 in Swiss, 1 in the finals. But it did go really well. The one I lost against Brandon, perhaps I could have made some better plays, but yeah. So overall, pretty happy with this. But like, yeah, I would be interested to know how this does with like targeted testing against some of the matchups that are popular nowadays. Yeah. Okay, let's go to the corp because this was the really spicy stuff. Called it Rain of Arrows because I was very tired of trying corpse and then feeling like, why is my ice just garbage? Like why is this broken for free and the runners have such an easy time getting through it? And so the idea of resting an archer for free just became more and more appealing. And even though like a lot of people did really well with like Facet Ob and stuff like that also plays Eminent Domain and rests Archer, I kind of wasn't feeling I kind of dismissed the idea out of hand because I was just like, people are always going to tech for assets, so it's not going to work that well, which may be like partially true. I don't know, but like that deck seems more resilient than I gave it credit for. It can pivot to the remote plan decently well. But anyway, so I was trying to put this in something else, and I was like, well, if I'm going to score small agendas, that means I'm advancing stuff a lot, and then build to last makes a lot of sense. And then I got, even greedier, and then I'm like, well, what if when I score the eminent, I also have a Tucana? So Tucana ended up in here, and then more synergies started build in my head, because if you have this eminent plan with Tucana, then why not also play standoff, which can trigger Tucana 2, which can also be forfeited with Archer, which also synergizes with BTL. So there was all these synergies coming together between Tucana, Archer, standoff, and eminent domain, and the ID. These ideas started to like flow into each other, and that's usually a really good sign when you're building a deck, is ideas coming together like that. So that's where the deck started forming. I was still like concerned going into the tournament. A lot of runners are scary, and I probably didn't have the proper practice, but Crew Hosh is kind of scary because they can still trash your Archer with Devil Charm and Crew. But the hope is that, well, yes, but they still need to get through your other ice, which might not be that easy. And if you kind of get a good start, then there will be too much ice for them to deal with, essentially. Didn't get to put that into practice in the tournament. It was doing okay in practice. But yeah, as for the tournament, I guess I was expecting a lot of Crew Hosh, maybe some mulch decks. There was some criminal going around on JNet as usual, but with this kind of list, I'm really not concerned with criminal. Oh, and I guess I should go over the rest, but like a lot of the rest of the slots just kind of make sense in BTL. Like Biovault we've seen in Sokka's lists, but it's like, yeah, if you get a bunch of strong eyes up, then having an upgrade that just ends the run is, of course, incredibly good. So Biovault always makes sense. Mesting Chesvo becomes taxing and is something you will click anyway, probably, to get your money. It's the yeah. So I think a lot of these make sense. Winchester I really like because you can tutor it with Tucana and put it on HQ. You kind of want a lot of those, for lack of a better word, like fuck you pieces of ice, which like Archer and Winchester are. They're just like, I'm way too good for my cost, and you're gonna have a tough time getting into this server now. So that's how you snowball. If you can protect HQ and your remote, then you start to like put stuff on R&D usually. Now issues with this. So I had a lot of issues. Boss says the BTL having most of its econ cooked in is huge compared to OB. So I think that's true. That's one of the things I really liked. It also enables you to do some crazy stuff, but like the OB has a lot of advantages too. Like one big problem that you have with this BTL that I really ran into, and that I'm also trying to solve in a new version. By the way, like Surveyor wasn't doing much all tournament long. Maybe it did a little bit in practice, but I was kind of regretting this include. So the idea was that, well, you have another ice that can end the run without needing forfeits, without needing to be on HQ, and it's a sentry. So you can end the run and it's a sentry, and it's great because then you can gear check them on all three types. But in practice, this is just way too ambitious. The ice is not good early game, which is where you're at your weakest. It's too expensive to res. Like if you're up against, which is a very popular deck now, by the way, if you're up against Mulch, which is a bad matchup, and you go for an opening where you put 2 eyes on the remote and an Eminent Domain behind or a Rashida behind, which will be a common line, because if you just put 1 ice, they can just Botulus and get in. If you put 2 eyes, they can still try to get in with Botulus by putting like a Botulus on a random and trying to run and hoping that the other one doesn't stop the run. I even thought of a third scenario, which is they can run to force a res, but then if you have border control, you get 2 credits back, and then if they Botulus the border control and try to run back in, you get $2, and that will make you afford to rest the other ice, so you can pop the border control and then have them run into the other ice. So with all of those things combined, not to mention the fact that you're not guaranteed to see Botulus. Like I don't know exactly what the odds are between the price and moshing, but of course the price would force you to install the Botulus right away. But between all those things, there's like probably at least a 50% chance that they can't touch the remote. Like getting Cookbook Audrey is unlikely turn 1. You kind of just have to give up if that happens. But importantly, for all of these cases is that, well, the Surveyor is not getting rest in any of them because you're on 4 credits in this particular scenario. And also, I mean, you're really not wanting to rest this at all early game usually. But I already tried adjusting a little bit to try to address these problems. So here's another version that has tree line and an extra Hortum, 2 tree lines. So I cut 1 Tucana because, again, the really good runners were quite good at getting in into your remote and forcing rests, getting you low on credits. And then it becomes very hard to make use of Tucana early on. So getting 3 copies to like really aggressively go for it early on is not really worth it. The logic, like one of the dream plays that was in my mind when I made this was that, okay, turn 1, you put Tucana, Eminent Domain, and an ice in front, turn 1. And if they don't run, you score the Eminent with the Tucana, you get an Archer on your remote, or you get a Winchester on HQ, and like you ride off into the sunset or something like that. And that's a beautiful idea. But first of all, what if they just run and you're forced to rest? Well, now you can't do that. You can score the Eminent, but what was the Tucana there for? It didn't do anything. So then you will have to wait to make use of the Tucana. And so you can see how it's kind of tricky to actually fire the Tucana, especially early. So having 2 means that maybe you can still score it a little bit later once you've established, like maybe you have had the time to pop an NGO, play a hedge fund or something. Then now Tucana is live. But going for 3 is kind of dedicating a lot of deck slots to something that you probably can't do right away anyway. And I might consider even going lower than this. I don't know, like there's still experimentation to do with this deck. But yeah, that's why I'm going lower with the Tucana. Other ideas is like so Oberth Protocol was a card that people kind of freaked out over. Because it's so rarely played, and I think it very rarely makes sense. It's almost exclusively been used in Jemison, and Jemison just hasn't been that great of an ID. But the card is actually really good in decks that play small agendas like this. Like Standoff, if you're already playing Standoff, you have like such a natural target for this, and the effect is incredibly strong. And of course, you can even forfeit your Eminent Domain, because you might be scoring another one anyway. So that if you do that way, then it doesn't mess with your win condition to get to 7. So Oberth was actually doing a lot of work because it speeds up your game so much once it's live. Like they really want to pinhole this like as soon as you res it. And yeah, so I was even considering like maybe you want another Oberth. So I'm not sure if I like prefer to go 1 Tucana, 2 Oberth or not. Other considerations might be logjam to get more subroutines against all the nasty stuff, but I think that kind of runs into a little bit also the problem that it's not something that you really want to be resting early. So I think something like this is what I'm going for, maybe small adjustments. Another consideration might be business as usual, just to have something to purge viruses. I found that Maverus and Magnet and stuff to deal with mulch just is probably not doing enough to justify having the hate cards. So I think going for general solutions works better, and business as usual is not that bad in general, I guess. But I would always try without the tech at first. Yeah. But also some other neat notes about this that you may not know if you haven't tried this before is if you score a send a message of a Tucana, you can install the archer with the Tucana, then decline to rest the archer, and then rest the archer with the send a message. So that's also a nice little interaction. So you have a lot of ways to rest the archer. You can rest it with eminent domain, but if you draw it, you can rest it by forfeiting a standoff or scoring a send a message, or you can score rest it from your deck as well with Tucana and send a message, or standoff and Tucana. So you have a lot of ways of resting the archers. And the archers are like what secure your remote, then which then allows you to snowball. So the one of the problems with the deck is this, that they're getting the remote strong is so important that you either, if they stop you from snowballing in the remote, you will probably lose. Unless they sacrifice a lot to do that, then you can maybe claw your way back. You just kind of grind value, advance your eyes, then just keep putting stuff in the remote. Because it's not, maybe for mulch, it's like free to get through Tree Line and Hortum or something if you double ice the remote. But for a lot of decks, that's not going to be free at all. That's going to be a big investment. So I really think your main problem is mulch. But yeah, the point I was going to make was because you need to secure your remote to start snowballing, your centrals might be a little bit vulnerable, which is why I think this version makes more sense again, because it has more ice, allowing you to maybe like afford to put an ice on HQ or take a turn off to defend your centrals a little bit before you go for the remote. Which of course, like you would prefer to start snowballing right away, but it's nice to have the option to be a bit more defensive, especially considering that like the archers are dead cards early on. One of the big weaknesses. Standoff also helps solve that a little bit. Like if you draw an archer too early, and it's like one of your only pieces of ice, maybe you have like one other ice. Then scoring a standoff means that, okay, now you can actually use this archer to defend yourself early on. NGO is, of course, really good in BTL, great synergy with Oberth. Yeah. And I think SDS just makes a lot of sense because, especially if your centrals are vulnerable early, it's good to have fewer agendas that are stealable in the early game. And this sometimes shooting a program is like really good, killing a conduit or a charged Audrey even perhaps. Um, let me get some water, and then I'm gonna get to all these questions because there looks like there's a few of them. Okay. Um. do. Diogene says, after deck explanation, would you do the analysis of your games in the finals? I don't think so. It's not usually what I do, unfortunately. Um, maybe on a separate stream. I think today I'm definitely too tired for that. But I might consider doing it on a separate stream. Um, yeah, it's not my usual cup of tea, but maybe that would be interesting to get into. Because when I was thinking about my Netrunner content, I realized that the stuff I like the most is where I kind of get to do back and forth with the audience. Like, I can rant for a long time about my lists, as you can all tell, but it really gets the most fun when there are questions posed and comments, and there becomes a back and forth. That is much harder to do when you're playing. When you're playing, you need to put a decent amount of your focus, or most of your focus, really, into the game. Like I try to just glean on the other screen with the comments when there's maybe my opponent's turn or my opponent is thinking for a long time, then take the time to look. But otherwise, you kind of want to be focusing on the game. If not for yourself, then to not take too long for your opponent, to be respectful. So the type of content where I can just like banter with the audience is the most fun, and that kind of would work, I guess, with replays too. So maybe not a bad idea, Diogene. I just haven't thought about it much. So we'll see on that. Trat Penguin says, I like that Ob can play Icewall and feel good about it since they become extract targets. Yeah. So a big thing I was thinking about was like, oh, well, what if I, to solve all these early ice res problems, put like Icewall in, I can put Magnet in, I can maybe even put Descent in. And actually one concern with this deck is playing against Essa. And Descent is something that gets agendas out of archives that you can actually tutor. So maybe it would force Essa to like check archives every time cards are milled. Because otherwise you can just bounce your Descent, shuffle them back, something like that. Or you just draw it and have it as a tool. Because in my game against Tuno, I ended up like having to... I ended up with an agenda in archives. I actually lost an R&D, but the fact that I'm not sure if I would have iced R&D otherwise, but maybe. But the problem was I had an agenda in archives, kind of needed protection, so I ended up losing on R&D instead. Kind of all my spin doctors got milled, so maybe having an extra piece helps, and this is also tutorable with Tucana. So I was considering all of these thin pieces of ice, but it's just a big problem when you're trying to build a glacier deck, having a bunch of tiny pieces of ice. Like to your point, Stratpimi, like you are not Ob. So I tried this a little bit, and I was like, well, okay, it does fend off the runner like early on, maybe, so you can get your eminent domain or whatever off. But like it's such a non-taxing piece of ice that later you just become kind of sad looking at it. You're playing a very slow deck, so the runner is going to establish their rig. It works much better in a rush deck. So having these thin pieces of ice in a slow deck doesn't make that much sense, unfortunately. So I like Treeline and Hortum because they have pretty high strength, even though they're only 4 to res. So we might need a lot of money to be able to Tucana out the ice that we have. But we know that it's going to be useful. One thing that was really nice with the ice wall was that it would be easier to afford to install ice with Tucana, because sometimes you can rest the Tucana and then you have like super low credits after you rest it. So if you wanted to use it, you would have to like get like a 1 credit ice, which would be nice to like block Bankar and stuff in some situations. It's just that they are not good for anything else. So you need them to be kind of good in every case. So you end up not wanting to play Ice Wall or Descent or Magnet because they're just too bad in the long game. Did you do? Yeah. So that's really what's so good about Ob is like, okay, it can go fast and it can always do something with every piece, and they're often just temporary pieces. And I think I even forgot to fully make the point, but like I was talking about how this deck can have troubles protecting the remote against mulch, but if you're playing Ob, then Border Control is like always defending the remote. You can always defend the remote for a turn with that. Of course, because you're not BTL, if you go down to 1 credit, you have to figure out a way to score the eminent domain, but that's another issue. Let's see. Siat says Oberth usually saved me a whole turn in the games I found and used it. Yeah, Oberth is like, it's so sick that when you get it, that you kind of want to play more, but it might be a mistake, just because you do have 3 archers as well that you want to use for this stuff. But like, when you get it and it works, it's so incredibly good that like maybe it's correct to go there. I don't know, that you could make a case that like maybe Tucana is just too ambitious altogether, and then you could free up some deck slots. But I don't know. This is like work in progress. So to see like, okay, well, how far can we push this archetype? Does it work? Does it not work? Like in theory, let's say you cut to Tucana, you get like another tree line, another Hortum. Now you have maybe an even easier time defending yourself early and then snowballing, and maybe like you're okay with like snowballing less hard but being more secure, something like early on. I don't know. And I guess you can ask yourself then, like, well, I guess if you go for that, maybe you would go for a second Oberth. I think like even without the Tucana, I do like the standoffs. Like it has synergy with the Tucana, but like, it's like you're spending 3 clicks in a card. The runner has to trash something, basically, and then you get to res an archer later on, or an Oberth. I think that's like pretty good payoff. Where were I? Boss says, I really like the lack of barriers. For what it's worth, makes ESA decks super sad. I think that's kind of fair. I think boarding, like, you still want at least one barrier, probably. ESA is a difficult matchup either way. Treeline, you might just be a card you don't install against ESA. I don't know. Of course, I don't know. I feel like you need to rush against ESA anyway. One thing I liked about having an advanceable barrier is that like they no longer know if the ice you're advancing is a code gate. With the previous list, like the only advanceable ice are code gates, so you know that what breaker you need, which could be a little bit of an issue. I will say though, with ESA, with tree line, if you have, let's say you have one tree line out and you advanced it once, then you draw the other tree line, then you can actually expend it and get one of your tree lines up to 8 strength, and like Begamot might actually just not be able to break that. I guess Lamb can, But that's expensive, right? Let's look at it. Yeah, maybe you go to 9 because 8 is like 5 to break, but 9 is 8. Um, yeah. So all I'm saying is, I guess it takes a while for Behemoths to get up to strength. So a tree line might actually not be that bad if they have to boost Lamb to break it. But I digress, I guess. I can't really think of the other Wayland eyes. Like I was considering Logjam a bit, but again, there's some issues there. I can't think of other Wayland eyes beyond these two that would kind of fit in this deck right now. It's just like a lot of things fit really well in Ob that are good, or they're just like way too much work, like Pharaohs or something like that, or Logjam. Ba says that works off then stealing it off at Tucana too, right? Yeah, so if they steal a send a message off Tucana, you can do the same thing because you get both triggers. So that's kind of neat too. Of course, like typically you don't want to be giving up your 3-pointers, but it's a good consolation price if that happens. Oh, and I guess on top of that's a good segue into talking a little bit about the agenda suite. So of course, you're a 44 card deck with 8 agendas. Well, 11 really, but these aren't worth points unless they mad dash you. So it's a high agenda density, but I figure for the opportunity to play like such a snowbally agenda, it's kind of worth it. One little note I will have like in favor of this is that sure, like if they steal an eminent domain, it does help them towards winning, but it also means that any other eminent domain steals are not worth points. So that's at least a little consolation price. Like they always need to steal at least 2 of the 3-pointers. That's just a slight note because I was experimenting for a while in going up to 49 and playing 8 agendas worth points, but only 2 eminent domain. But then that nullifies the point of the deck. The point of the deck is eminent domain. So no, you try to go for the more ambitious version, and then hopefully you just get servers that it like in return for this sacrifice of playing so many agendas, you get more secure servers eventually with Archer, and so it means it works out. Yeah. What's the other thing? Just go full Sokka and play a rhyme, the ultimate Bankar blocker. I guess that's interesting. Yeah, I was thinking about Tithe as well, but like, yeah, the thing is, yeah, they just so like you already have 3 eyes that you can't use early to like defend yourself, which you really need to do. Like you need eyes that end the run, because how are you gonna pop Rashidas or score eminent domains if you don't have a remote? You know, so adding any more eyes that they can just go through is not good. That's why I think, like, unfortunately, we have to stay away from this. If we were playing a deck like Sokka's and like these 3 Archer were like logjams or something, so we had eyes that we could like always make use of, you're more okay with adding a few more situational eyes. So Boss says, yeah, I like the tree lines way more than the idea of ice walls because they're cheap enough to jam behind early, but can be very taxing a late game. Yeah, exactly. That's the idea. Of course, like, it's very sad that it's a 1 sub ice, because like Bankar becomes better against it. It's very easy to get through with Boomerang. It's easy to just botulous this. But like most of your eyes is soft to botulous anyway, and Surveyor was too. The only thing that isn't that soft against this is Archer, because it has a lot of subroutines. So you just have to deal with the fact that they're gonna botulus something, and you hope to get an archer on the servers so that they can't just like botulus everything and run in. But again, mulch might be a worse matchup. Boss says, would you ever play Colossus over Surveyor? I you say I realize it doesn't ATR, and I think that is just the main issue. I don't think so, because it's still just like 2 subs where like the tag doesn't matter. And it's 6 to res. Yeah, I don't think so. Like another thing was like in the original list, we had 3 barriers, 4 codex, and 7 sentries. So like half our eyes were sentries. And of course, like the reasoning was that, well, the archers, we might not be able to rest them right away, but our plan is to kind of dig ourselves out of that hole, and Surveyor wasn't helping much with that anyway. Again, I don't think Colossus helps with that much anyway, and if we do get past the early game, we're going to have good sentries anyway in Winchester and Archer. So I don't think we need like another big ass sentry that's also weak to like botulus and stuff. Yeah, I think that's just a mistake in this list. It makes a lot more sense in Nasaka's list, because there you don't have the archer, so you kind of want like another big ass sentry, right? Yeah, I guess those most of my thoughts. Please give more questions if you have them, because we might be going notes. One thing I really liked about both the decks is that they're both kind of like just tech card free, no tech cards. I love that. I'm still trying to keep that with the BTL. Like any change, I'm trying to keep it tech card free, although I was experimenting with tech cards. But it seems like the way to go is to stay tech card free and try to find solutions that apply to like all the matchups. Now, of course, we have, well, I was going to say Dawn, but it's, was it Eclipse? Let's go to Null Signal. Elevation, never mind. Haha, Elevation. We're going to have Elevation soon, which means both of the decks that I've shown here today, they're not going to be legal anymore. Netrunner is about to change quite radically. And so like you may only be able to play this for a couple more months. I don't remember when Elevation releases actually. But soon, like, this won't be playable anymore, but there will be at least some time to try to optimize this and have fun with it. Maybe there are some tournaments still where you could bring it and see if it does anything. Overall, I think there's probably better options, but I like having the ability to tinker with this and see if we can make it any better. And Odd Radish says, what tech cards would you consider in BTL? So I was considering Magnet and Maverus. But again, I kind of already dismissed them because I didn't like how it affected. Like, the Magnet is so bad for the Ice Suite. Maybe I could still see Maverus. But the thing is, I'm not sure that it's enough to deal with the mulch decks anyway. Although I can imagine there are some blowout situations where you get like a Maverus mid-run and it's like really good if they don't have a Simmel chip prepared. So they can still kind of get around it by having Simmel chip. But I think the problem with that is I guess that might solve the matchup in cases where you get to snowball in the way you want early on, so that you have a remote, and then that lets you kind of like build from there. But if they just kind of like crack your remote continuously, I don't know if it helps. Still, I think it's fair to consider Maverus, especially considering that the crew Hoshiko's I think I have some Crew Hoshiko lists here, the one that Ben played. These lists are popular right now. They play Amakua and Leech. So having Maverus in archives means you're no longer just farming Leech Amakua there. If you haven't had the time yet or just didn't feel like icing archives, that's I guess a little bit of a note for this deck is, or I guess this deck now because this is the current version, but that you against those decks you try to get archives iced before they snowball completely with the Almakua Leech stuff. Yeah, but Maverus helps a lot with that. Because like they can still maybe like pierce a server with Crew and then just charge on that server for a turn. That becomes harder to do if you have Maverus on archives. And you don't have to commit any ice there, you can double ice the other servers. Other tech cards, so also against virus stuff, I was a little bit considering business as usual, because this like click compresses you a lot. Getting to threat 3 is not that hard, and then you get to purge like maybe Audrey, and you get to place 2 advancements on different cards, like which I think can be quite useful in this deck. Like imagine you have like, you could like advance the agenda in your remote, install an NGO, play business as usual, get like another token on the agenda. I don't know. It's maybe a bit of a niche scenario, but you have a lot of advanceable cards in your deck that this could make use of. So I think considering this is fine. I don't know what else actually. I don't think it's a big list. Yeah, was think. Wild Turtok says your runner has only a single rotating card. If I've seen that right, you may be right. No, Fenris is also rotating. No, actually, Diesel and Gamble are both rotating as well, and Parisha, and all of these are actually important. But like the thing that really kills the deck if we lose it is Aesop. So. This deck will not exist unless they make like some kind of Aesop clone. Like maybe they make an Aesop that give you 2 credits in a card. That would be sick. But no, I think this deck is going away, unfortunately. You're going to have to think of something else. And Odd Radish says, how bad is the matchup I just joined? So sorry if already covered. No, that's okay. I went over some possible like early game lines against Mulch. And in essence, they are very good at breaking your ice, and especially because Mulch is good at getting into your remote early on. You might even need to like double ice your remote with 2 ice that cost like 4 credits to res each to actually secure it. Even then, they could get in, but it becomes more like of a 50-50 kind of thing. So, yeah. But still, like the fact that you need to overcommit ice to the remote, so like you need to commit a lot to the remote to score. Maybe you can slow down ice your centrals and then get to the remote, but then you need to draw a lot more ice, and it also gives them more time to get into the remote. What you really want is to be able to score an eminent domain early, so they can't get into the remote super easily anymore. But in order to get there, you might need to already commit 2 ice. So you see how your remote will look ridiculous with 3 ice with your centrals open, and then potentially, depending on their draw, they will already have like Cookbook Audrey and start charging that, and now you're in really big trouble. Yeah, because your play pattern kind of exposes your centrals, I think the matchup is really bad. If you can get rolling, I did win like some games in practice, but I think I lost most of them. I think these changes improve the matchup though. But yeah, I think this is like kind of the crux of the problem. And Botulus just breaks your stuff too cheaply. And if they get Audrey charged, it also breaks things too cheaply. If you can ice up, purge the Audrey after it's been installed, or if you can ice up before the Audrey even hits the board, you have a chance, because then you can, if your remote is secure, you can start getting like reinforcing centrals with Eminent Domain and Tucana. And yeah, then your servers will actually be strong enough that you can close the game out from there. It's not impossible, but quite a hard matchup. Yeah, I think every other runner you have a much better chance. Siad says no shot. NSG reprints Aesop's lol. I think they hate the card. Why? Why? What did Aesop ever do to anyone? Is it all the human trafficking, or what's the problem? I don't know. Maybe I guess it quote unquote limits design space, which is fair. Like the thing is, kind of every card limits design space, but if a card has already been around for a long time, it's kind of fair to be like, this is a part of the game we don't need anymore. We've had it for long enough. I think that's fine. That's fair. Yeah, but that definitely kills this archetype, especially some kind of Boitata stuff, I think. Aesop, but 4 credits is fine because we play the price, so then he's still, is only 1 credit more expensive. To Ba's comment. And Odd says, I would have thought that being able to kind of overwrite botches would go a long way. So the Tucana stuff is let's go back to that, the mulch discussion. So to be able to Tucana, you need the secure remote in the first place, which again is not a guarantee. If you do get it, then it becomes like an actual game. If you don't get your remote, you will automatically lose. That's kind of what happened in the streamed game in the first round of the finals against Amarum. I just got completely crushed because I was trying to protect my remote with border. I had I think it was border control archer or something like that on the remote. So just installing Botulus blind could mean that the border control is safe. But then Amarum got a cleaver and ran, and there's nothing I can do. The cleaver is perfect in that situation. It was a 1-up, so I just lose. So the remote got cracked, and I just lost immediately. So if the remote gets cracked before your eminence, and the eminence is stolen, you probably just lose, unless you can score another eminence somehow. But if it gets cracked in the first place, it's very hard to establish it. But you lose so much time even then that you probably will lose on the centrals. Now, to get to your point about Tucana, so if you do get the remote, you get an archer on the remote, you have it well protected, then you get to a point where you can get the Tucana triggers. And I want to emphasize that you don't typically trash the ice that has Botulus on it. You want to kind of tax the symbol chips and the labor rights of the mulch player, because if you trash your ice, they can sort of recur their Botulus almost endlessly with the symbol chips and with the labor rights. They will probably have time to go through their deck because you're not the fastest deck, especially because the mulch can slow you down. There's matchups where you can rush out because there isn't much interaction. Versus Essa, you kind of just go straight for the win and hope that you can score out before they score out on your archives. But versus mulch, they often get to a point from the practice games that I had. It was actually one of the few matchups that I actually practiced because it was my round one finals opponent. So against mulch, you usually get to a point where they can start labor rightsing symbol chips back. So if you have been trashing every ice that gets Botulus, well, I mean, every ice res is a big cash investment. You can't, and it's only 2 credits for them or a symbol chip to get a Botulus out. So you absolutely can't afford to just be trashing your ice. Usually there may be some edge cases where you score a standoff and you see an opportunity to get some value by trashing an ice. I'm not saying it's never good, but just that often if you do get that, don't override the ice. Just put like an ice in front of the botulist ice, and then they will have to commit another botulist to that ice, and then so on. So like if they ever need to switch servers, now all the botulists, let's say they have all the botulists on R&D, but they find themselves wanting to contest the remote. Well, it's very hard for them to just move all the botulists. They would need to spend all the symbol chips to get there. And so this means that the remote is kind of secure, or they need to get in with like only revolver or tricks. So yeah, that's a big note against mulch. So that's one of the ways that you can actually win is like eventually they don't have enough botulists to cover all of the ice that they need to break, and they haven't been able to gather enough Audrey counters to just get in anyway. So you can still lose if they can farm Audrey counters on something else. Did you? Ba says the turn one Pricer Cleaver was so game breaking. Yeah, it was. It was so sad. I was like, okay, I had this game plan in mind, and I hadn't even thought about Cleaver being able to land on the board. I was so happy. Like I figured it out. Blind Botulus doesn't work against this line. Okay, we're good. Well, not we're good, but I have a chance to get discored. And then as soon as the Cleaver hits the table, I realize if you get Cleaver down, there's nothing that you're afraid of running into. Like except the only thing that would have saved me was Hortem, and that was a one-off in the deck. So that was crazy. Odd Radish says, but you have 6 agendas you can safely feed on a Tucana if necessary. Yeah. I'm not sure what that's in reference to, but yes, that's sort of like why Tucana makes sense. Like you have all these tiny agendas that you want to be scoring anyway, so why not get some Tucana value? And of course, this is a modified list. Original one was leaning even harder into Tucana and playing 3, but I'm finding that it is harder to make use of this than I initially thought. So I'm trying to like have a more stable build with more ice instead. Then they can't run next turn with the real push. Yeah. That's the idea. Is like if let's say you have a like the best case is of course scoring an eminent, but you can do stuff like you score a standoff on the Tucana, and if your remote isn't already secure, maybe you use that to secure the remote with a piece of ice. Like you could get Archer and forfeit the standoff, and then that clears the way for the next score. And being able to do that from hand is another advantage of standoff. So you have like a Tucana, you don't commit that hard to the remote. Maybe you only have one ice, like a border control, and the Tucana behind, and then you can just score a standoff on it and reinforce it with Archer, which lets you like put an eminent in next turn and score that. So even if they were to get in, they would have only gotten a Tucana. So it's kind of nice, that combo where you don't need to commit so hard. Siad says, Amaram and I practice this matchup a lot too. Yeah, Amaram was playing it really well, and I guess that's probably also what led Amaram to pick that side, because I thought at first the Facetob would be the worst matchup for sure, but like yeah, once I started practicing the mulch one, I was like, no, this is really oppressive. Actually, I actually have way better game with the lat against the Facetob. So I was really bummed, especially I got the worst start possible there. But you know, it happens sometimes. Why no thimble rig is a question. Well, I'm not gonna say is like it wouldn't work, but it falls into some of the problems I had with the previous ideas that I had, that I really kind of want every ice in the deck to be kind of taxing on its own. Of course, it's kind of neat to be able to like move around the Winchesters so they fit. But I don't know that these are needed in the deck. It's nice to have something cheap to fend people off initially, but it's not taxing at all, which I don't like, given the fact that we really need to get taxing service with this, or the border buy vaults and stuff don't do much. So I guess that's why I would say no Thimble Rig. Another writer says, sorry, I was referring to the fact that Tucana also triggers on steel as bait. Oh, yes. It does. Like, usually that is not what you want. That's bad for you. But yeah, it's like a neat side interaction. Like we were talking about how if you have send a message and Tucana in the remote, in desperate times, you can have Tucana send a message in the remote, and that lets you get like an archer for free. And yay, at least you get an archer for free, and maybe that lets you like kind of catch up afterwards. So yeah, there are some neat interactions there too. Jai says, "What up, Mr. Bridge? What up, Jai? How's it going?" You are arriving at the time where I have basically covered like I think everything about these decks. But if you have any questions and stuff, then let me know, because I think the stream will be. I'm about to close the stream if there are no more questions. But we'll take a super duper short break first. So I'll be back in just a second. Okay, we are back. Another editor says, the Archer sent a message play was sick, by the way. I was pumping gas in my car while watching and got so hyped. Thanks. Yeah, like the, I assume, I guess you're referring to the game, the last round of the EMEA Swiss, where the deck really got to shine. So I was happy, because it was doing so poorly in the finals. I was happy it got that moment and got people hyped. Because, I think that shows the appeal of the deck is you get to do all this rude resing of a bunch of archers for free. And it can look so ridiculous when it snowballs as intended. But of course, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. And Jai says, I played a little bit of the BTL, is pretty sick, but definitely quite poor. Yes. Yeah, it's very credit demanding. And part of, I don't know if you've seen, I guess not. I posted like a suggested new version because I think Surveyor wasn't pulling its weight, and I think 3 Tucano was probably too much. It maybe helps a little bit with the issues, but yeah, it's like super hungry for credits, the deck. So I think you're right about that. It's like one of the nice things is because you're BTL, you can be quite poor and still do stuff. But I think with more ice like this, with more advanceable ice, there will be more cases where you can perhaps like defend 1 central or maybe even 2 if you draw a lot of ice early on before doing all your nasty stuff. But in general, if you're able to protect your remote, that will also just like tie into everything else, make your other plays better. Legit think that armed acid projection would be good here. Oh yeah, I was kind of thinking about this. Let's look at it. I think the problem I have is just that it would be a card that's not useful until quite late. Gain 1 for each card type among face-up cards in archives. So, well, let's think about this. So it's +1 early on. You will getting an operation into archives is not a given because we're only on 3 hedge fund. Acid you will have pretty quickly. Yeah, I don't know about this, Jai, because like it takes quite a while for this to work. Like as a one-off later in the game, it will do something. Maybe. But you need like 4 cards for it to be better than a hedge fund. I'm very skeptical. Because like you're not as good as Ob with just filling your archives with crap. Unfortunately. Todd Pingvin says, if you didn't cover it already, I'm curious about your thoughts on when to play the conduit and when to keep remote camping. Yeah, good question. Usually if you get, there's 2 reasons to play the conduit. Okay, let's put it like this. If you remote camp as long as they can't just fast advance out from hand. If they can fast advance out from hand, then you're kind of in scramble mode and you need to find agendas on centrals. You still need to stop them from scoring out from a remote, of course. That's like worst case scenario. But otherwise, as long as you gaining enough money from your drip to consistently be running the remote, I think the main priority is denying scores from the remote. Once you can afford to also install the conduit, then you start doing that, because then you're preemptively, well, of course, you will be stealing agendas, but you're also making sure that they don't draw new agendas, which means you will stop having to run the remote every single turn, perhaps. So that's like how you kind of like close the game out eventually. It's like the conduit will just be eating up the agendas from R&D. They're not scoring any from the remote. Another case is you don't have your rig to actually contest the remote. They are scoring out very fast, but they under-defended R&D. Slamming a conduit then to start digging will force them to respond in some way a lot of the time. Yeah, like usually if you have the option to remote camp and you can deny them from their fast advance plan, then you do that as much as possible. And then you conduit to force them to defend R&D or pivot away from scoring to buy some time. Because often against the fast decks, what you're lacking is the time to completely set up your rig. If you get it set up and you get the remote lock, you probably win the game. I hope that answers it. It's something like that, especially against faster decks. charging this to like to slow them down a bit is often quite nice. But yeah, if you can get the remote lock, that's really useful. Or that's like, yeah, the main goal. Jai says, I may or may not have cribbed some ideas for an eternal deck I'm building. Wait, what does cribbed mean? Anyway, that sounds great. Boss says, expend an eminent domain to get a free ice rest install spin, play acid for like 9 credits, lol. I've expended eminent domain 0 times with this deck, but to be fair, maybe it was just because like I never actually properly considered it. It might have been a situation where it was actually good, and maybe you can like spin it away or something. But overall, like, yeah, the eminents are very precious, and you want to score them. Jai says, yeah, I like 1x in some of the obs. Yeah, I saw someone was on one of them in the facet ob. Asset upgrade is pretty free. Oh, if you get into a standoff war. Well, unlike what our practice games might indicate, getting into a standoff war is usually not advisable for the corp, or even if it is advisable, it's not that common to get into a standoff war. Okay, so that says that that answers the question, so that's great. Yeah, anything else? Otherwise, I think we're wrapping up. But I have time for another question if there are any. But otherwise, I think we did it. I finally got energy after a while. I was like, when I started streaming again, I felt like I was going so slow in the beginning. Like my thoughts were like, syrup. So many that I wanted to get out, but like just tripping over myself. It's quite frustrating when that happens. But like then when you get rolling and you start answering questions, like the words come to you eventually. Well, on another note, I guess while I'm waiting to see, I'm really excited for Elevation. Like it's gonna, like, losing all the FFG cards, it's gonna be such a big difference that, like, for someone who likes or really loves brewing decks, it's gonna be so much fun looking at that new meta. It's gonna be so fresh. Jai says, gotta head to sleep now, catch you around. Happy Lunar New Year, y'all. And happy Lunar to you, Jai. Okay. I mean, I think that's it. I think I've given enough time for the stream delay. So I want to say thank you all for watching, and thank you for, definitely I love the chatters when I'm doing streams. It just makes it so much better. It becomes alive, and it becomes a lot more fun. So thank you all for participating in that way. I've been not doing that many Netrunner streams. Well, I haven't been doing one since summer, really. But I'm trying to think of more ways that I can do streams. I might be back soon. We'll see. I have some ideas. So maybe I'll be back soon. We'll see. But yeah, thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye bye. Take care.